Hi everyone, welcome to lesson one of our hip hop module. We're looking at the origins of hip hop and hip hop drum beats. If you're completing the quiz on Microsoft Teams, make sure that it is up at the same time as this video. So, we're also going to be learning about sounds of the drum kit and something called drum machines. We're going to be learning about beats 2 and 4 and why those are important in hip hop drum beats, and also a really important word called syncopation. First, what I'd like you to do is look carefully at these images and write down some of the things you can see on your quiz. Pause your video to complete this question. Okay, answers coming up. What these pictures show is the area where hip hop began. And you can see that this area wasn't very well taken care of by the government. You can see that there's a sign on the wall saying we want affordable housing. So you can tell that there's poverty and people were struggling to make ends meet. You can also see that people are making music outside in the bottom left-hand corner, and in the top left-hand corner, there's somebody holding something called a boom box, which is something that people could walk around with playing music. So this is a map of New York, and it's the kind of four sections show you the five sections show you the five sections of New York, and hip hop began in the north in this area called the Bronx. It was in the 1970s, and as I said, it was a really poor area, and hip hop was like really linked to that. I'm going to show you a video, and I'd like you to answer the question: what are the four main parts of hip hop?
I ain't no joke. I used to let the mic smoke. Now I slam it when I'm done and make sure it's broke.
Hip-hop created a musical landscape in the 70s and early 80s by giving New York or the Bronx, especially the Bronx, a musical foundation or a new start, because we were just coming off the 60s where the entire city was bankrupt. That environment kind of gave birth to hip-hop. Hip-hop is a culture based on four foundational elements: DJing, MCing or rap, graffiti, and breakdancing.
People use the terms interchangeably, rap with hip hop, whereas hip hop is the bigger culture. Rap is something you do. Hip hop is something you live.
Write down the answers to this question. Pause the video now to finish the answers and then carry on with the video in a second. Okay, answers coming up. So the four main parts of hip hop are DJing, MCing, breakdancing, and graffiti. Below is just an image of a train that traveled to the Bronx. It was very common for graffiti to be put on trains. So this is actually graffiti from the Bronx in the 1970s, early 1980s, when hip hop was first coming out. There's some really famous songs and some really famous artists in hip hop. Now this is a little bit later, but this was a group from the Bronx called Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. This was written in 1982 and it's called The Message. And in it, you can hear them talking about their lives and the difficulties that the communities were facing. So I can't take the smell, can't take the noise, got no money to move out, I guess I got no choice. This is another really famous group called Public Enemy, who wrote a song called Fight the Power, and that came out in 1989, so it's a little bit later. Now actually Public Enemy weren't from the Bronx, they're from a different part of New York, but in their music video for Fight the Power, you can still see that the Bronx is represented as the birthplace of hip-hop. The lyrics Fight the Power, we've got to fight the powers that be, this is strongly linked to black rights groups, because of discrimination and because of subjugation of black communities. This hip-hop was kind of really linked to the struggle of black communities to make sure that their voices were heard and that they were treated equally. Now we're going to look at drum sounds in hip-hop. If you've got any more questions to answer on the quiz, just pause the video now. Okay, we're looking at a normal drum kit, and these are two instruments that we're going to learn to write for. One is called the hi-hat, which looks a bit like a cymbal, and one is called the snare. Just have a listen to this hip-hop beat, which has got really obvious hi-hat and snare sounds in it.
Presidents to represent me. I'm not the presidents to represent me.
Rockefeller,
I'm not the presidents to represent me.
What you hopefully heard was a kind of like, it almost sounds like a clapping sound, and it was on beats 2 and 4. I'm going to kind of talk over it as it plays, and that was the snare, and that was on beats 2 and 4. So let me play that for you again.
Presidents to represent me. Presidents to represent me.
4. Okay, that was the snare, that kind of louder sound, and we're going to come back to that in a second. So this was the instrument that actually created most of the drum sounds, especially in early hip hop, and it was called a drum machine. How it worked is the drum sounds that you've just seen on a normal drum kit were pre-recorded and put into this machine, and then people could make up their own drum beats. Now the drum machine has lasted right to this day, and we use a drum machine when we're using BandLab or when we're using GarageBand, except that's what a drum machine looks like on BandLab. You can see the squares at the bottom, the 16 kind of buttons on the bottom of the drum machine look the same as the 16 squares at the bottom of the BandLab drum machine. Let's come back to the snare. I've already told you it's on beat 1, 2, 3, 4. That's really important in hip hop, that you can hear that snare, and quite often they have a kind of clap sound at the same time. The hi-hat, well, it doesn't always, but quite often, and in the clip I just played, it plays on every quaver. So we're thinking like tete, tete, and there's 2 per beat. If I go back to that, actually, I can play it for you. So if I'm counting beats 1, 2, 3, 4, a hi-hat would sound 1, 2, 3, 4, tete, tete, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. That's what it would sound like. Now, I just want to show you that sometimes in drum notation, things can be notated with an X on it. So that's why I've notated it with an X on. So you might see things like this when you're looking at drum notation. Okay, this is how on BandLab you would write beats 2 and 4, how you'd make sure that your clap and your snare was on beats 2 and 4. Each kind of column is 1 beat. And so if you put a circle in the first box, that would mean it was on beat 1. And you can see that each beat lasts for 4 little squares. And there you can see that on the notation, the first beat is a rest, there's a silence, it's a crotchet rest, and the second beat is a crotchet, so the clap and the snare come in. The third beat is a rest, fourth beat is a crotchet. And so if you're on BandLab, you would put your snare and your clap sound on the 5th square in to make sure it's on beat 2, and on the 13th square in to make sure it's on beat 4. Okay, our hi-hat would look like this. So each quaver is kind of worth 2 squares. So it's every 2 squares to have a quaver. And that is exactly the same as how it's notated below. Okay, we're coming to a really important sound called the kick drum, which has got a kind of a much lower sound on the drum kit. And what's really important with the kick drum is that it is syncopated, which is one of our keywords, and this means off the beat, off the main beat. So this is what it looks like on BandLab. So I've still got beats 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the orange line is the kick drum line. Now, when you're writing it, I do have 2 rules for this. So the first one is that you want the kick on the first beat of the bar almost always, because it really shows you where it starts. So the first box, you need the orange circle. You need to have the kick drum on the orange circle. However, your rule is that you cannot have the orange circle on beats 2, 3, and 4 because then it would be on the beat. And hip hop music usually has a syncopated beat kick drum pattern, which means that you want to be clicking not on beats 2, 3, and 4, so not on square 5. And that's what it looks like if it is syncopated. Right, I would like you now to finish your Hip Hop Lesson 1 quiz. You can rewind this video if you need to listen to it again.